Welcome to the Mind Body Summit. I'm John Gabriel, author and creator of the Gabriel Method, a diet-free approach to sustained weight loss. And I'm very pleased today to be joined by James Colquhoun, who will be speaking about his knowledge about how real foods can transform your health. James Colquhoun is a filmmaker, and along with Laurentine ten Bosch, James created the films Food Matters and Hungry for Change. Both films are amazing films that have been viewed by millions of people around the world that are inspiring people to take charge of their own health. James's website, Food Matters TV, is a leading resource in natural health that's been viewed by over 3.7 million people. As you're listening today, you can learn more about James and watch some of his amazing documentaries at foodmatters.tv or at fmtv.com. So James, thanks so much for joining us. I understand that you first got into filmmaking due to a family medical crisis, and I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about that.
Sure, John. It's great to chat with you. And it was a little bit by accident because, my father was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, and it's a reasonably benign diagnosis. I mean, when most people get that type of diagnosis, they're like, well, it's not life-threatening, let's just play it out and see what happens. And I think that was his approach to it. And he started seeing medical specialists, his family practitioner, his medical doctor. And as he got further and further, more blood tests and more diagnosis work done, it led to more medications. And it was the increasing amount of medications that he was given that caused his health to decline, quite dramatically. And it was after about 3 or 4 years that, it was just steady decline in his overall health and well-being. And, at the end of about a 5-year period, he was on 6 different medications. Yeah. He gained over 50 pounds and was spending nights, with night sweats and horrible side effects and just feeling horrible. And it was at that point that it was like, whoa, hang on, this has really caught up to me.
And he was still chronically fatigued anyway, right? I mean, it wasn't doing anything for his chronic fatigue. His energy had
No, the drugs had just made his chronic fatigue worse.
Right.
And then additionally led to a diagnosis of depression and anxiety.
Which led to more drugs, obviously.
Indeed. And that was the really slippery, crazy cycle or slope that a lot of people end up on. And it's typical coming out of the medical profession with the diagnosis of something with a syndrome attached to it, because typically a syndrome means that they don't know exactly what causes it. Yeah. We don't know exactly how to cure it. So the approach differs depending on the GP, and it's just, let's start with this approach or these drugs and see if it works. It doesn't change to a new cocktail of drugs, they would call it. Literally, they would call it that.
And when you talk about syndromes in general, I mean, typically the medical approach is to treat symptoms. Right? Not really look at what the underlying cause is. So you're just treating one symptom after another with one drug after another, and then the drug is causing another symptom, which you then have to treat with another drug. Is that
precisely? And that was such a challenging, view of the body. But it's something that my dad prescribed to, or subscribed to, should I say, at the time. I mean, he was an accountant. People would entrust their business advice to him. So when he became ill, he entrusted his advice to the medical profession. Right. And it makes complete sense from that standpoint. However, there's so many different ways of looking at the body. And, Laurentine and I started studying nutrition, reading about natural therapies, and we could see there was this totally different paradigm for approaching health that we weren't exploring as a family at that stage. And it sort of became our little internal family mission to try to get him to give it a go, and that had its own challenges.
So what was that like in the beginning? What did that look like? What was giving it a go? Like this specifically, what types of foods were you introducing?
Sure. I think before we got to the foods, John, one of the biggest challenges was the belief systems around this whole shift. Yeah. And when you bring up the discussion of religion or politics at a dinner table, it always gets people's shackles up. There's always some sort of defense mechanism that comes up. They have their own beliefs about particular philosophies on life, and food is very much rooted in that same ilk, in that people tend to defend nutritional dogma like religion. So it was a real challenge for us to try to convince him about using raw foods and cleansing foods and detoxification, because this was very much in the realm of the hippie realm for him.
Sure. Too airy-fairy, basically.
Exactly. And, the nutritional and natural therapy industry didn't really have a great reputation, even only going back 5 or 10 years ago. Yeah. It was very much the fringe, and it was like non-scientific. And yet, we were coming across bodies of information and research showing that nutritional therapy and supplementation and detoxification could impact healing and improve immunity in so many ways. And these were papers from the Nutrition Journal in the US, or medical journals, the Lancet, for instance, the United Kingdom. And so this was peer-reviewed information. And so how could we get it to my dad, Roy? And so we found that interviewing these doctors and medical professionals as part of the original Food Matters film was a way to get this message to him, to help open up a new idea or a new belief system around.
That's really amazing. So basically what you're saying is, in a sense, this Food Matters film, this first film that you made, which really just launched a whole new paradigm of approaching health, was really kind of a labor of love to help convince your father that there's another way to heal your body. Is that true?
That's true, definitely, for the most part. But I think as we started getting into my dad's case, we began to realize that there was a much bigger picture at play here. Like, my dad was this small, petri dish experiment.
Yeah.
We've been sold this idea that there's a pill for every ill.
Right.
We've been sold this idea that for every condition we have, from ADHD to depression to anxiety, we've been really granular in our labeling process, and there's a drug for every one of those conditions. And that's a belief system that's been built on an economic background to benefit the corporations that are interested in selling more of those particular drugs.
Right.
So it was a really tough one to crack.
And it's almost like we get used to the fact that you go to the doctor and he's going to look at you, he's going to do a diagnosis, and he's going to prescribe something. That's usually that's what we're accustomed to. And there's never the thought that there's any kind of like ramifications to what we're being prescribed. The pill is just like, we just take it and we just assume that somehow a pill is going to magically treat a condition. I remember one time I was looking at this ad to treat toenail fungus. So there was a pill to treat toenail fungus, and I'm thinking to myself, hang on a second. There's a long way to go between the stomach and the toenails. You got to go through a lot of body to get from stomach to toenail. And I start reading, the disclaimers, the really, really fine print, and kidney failure, liver failure, heart failure, lung failure, and in certain rare instances, death. In other words, they tested this. They tested this toenail fungus pill on somebody, and they died.
It's crazy, but it's that's the danger. There's a huge risk associated with a drug-based approach to health.
But we're not told that. We're just said, okay, take this pill and take that pill. When you say your father was an experiment, I just think he was part of, he was just indicative of this whole system that we have.
True, and what was really strange for me to see, I think, sitting back almost from a little bit more of a, I was his son, obviously, but almost trying to philosophize how this was happening. Like, my dad was a smart man, he was a smart businessman. He was street savvy, he was savvy about the world, and yet, we're not taught how to really look after ourselves. That was what was clear to me. He was smart in so many areas of life. And yet there was this body of knowledge that he, and for instance, I hadn't been exposed to at all. And as a family, we hadn't been exposed to. And yet we all had it. We all had that knowledge only about 80 to 100 years ago. And then all of a sudden there's been this great loss of knowledge.
Yeah. I believe that in 100 years from now, or 50 or 100 years, sometime in the future, we're going to look at this time as the dark ages of medicine. Yeah. I really believe that there's so much dysfunction going on. So what was the turning point for your father, Roy, in getting him to start moving in this direction, and then also the turning point for his health?
There was one particular turning point that stood out for me, and it was quite grave, really. He started to experience, suicidal thoughts. Not to the point of like, look, I'm really going to do this, but I thought about killing myself today. There was this strange, he expressed it over a dinner party one day, and it really shocked us. And what was interesting was that we had recently discovered that there was some research showing that one of the drugs that he was taking at the time, Prozac, had denied for 10 years that it caused any suicidal side effects. And yet when they released their new drug, Prozac R, they had to say how it was different from the previous drug, in which they showed that the new drug wouldn't cause the suicidal side effects.
Which they never bothered to mention in the first place.
Exactly. So they denied it for 10 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the medical paradigm. there's similarities. I've never, you and I are friends, and I've never really talked to you about this, but my father was on anti-inflammatory, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, Vioxx, which is made by Merck, and he
Vioxx, yeah.
took a Vioxx pill every day for 4 years. And this was a guy who he was a dentist, so he's a scientist, and he was smart man, same kind of thing. And he was an athlete. Like he used to ride all over the country, and he traveled over the world with a group of people biking, and he went to the Pritikin Institute, all this kind of stuff. And he biked 35 miles one day, and then walked in the hospital and said, "If I didn't know better, I would think I was having a heart attack." And as soon as he said that, he dropped dead right there in the hospital, done.
Oh my God.
And then a month later, it turned out that Vioxx knew, that the Merck knew that Vioxx causes heart attacks. Jeez. And they knew it for 4 years, the whole time that my dad was taking the medication, and they had just had to finally release that information that they had hidden that for 4 years. So this is going on all over the place. And as you say, there's huge economic reasons for this kind of conflict of interest. But this is what's happening. This is what we all have to become aware of. So just to get some closure on your father's story, he started looking into really believing in this idea that he could heal himself more naturally, and then was he able to heal himself? Or?
Yeah, well, that was the first step, was the belief, and then after that, we focused on doing a detox with him, and that involved going to his cupboard and his fridge and like contrabanding everything that was really, what we were discovering was more detrimental to his health than beneficial. And it was, for his case, it was unique because he'd been on drugs for so many years. He'd put on a fair bit of weight, so we needed to handle it carefully, and he was working in consultation with a naturopathic doctor as well. And so what we had was, we helped him come off his medications and increase therapeutic doses of supplementation to help support his brain and his overall health, from vitamin C to fish oil to 5-HTP, which is a precursor to serotonin in the brain, to high-dose B vitamins, including B3 niacin, and then also completely changing his diet. So moving from a gluten and heavy sort of meat-based diet, more green, cleansing-based diet with juices and smoothies and lots of hydration. He went from having like bread and bacon and eggs in the morning for breakfast to having like mung bean sprouts and a juice. This was a radical shift in his diet.
Yeah.
And that caused a radical shift in his body and well-being. And in a matter of 3 months, he was off all his medications.
Wow.
He was back to his original weight. So he'd lost the 50 pounds or the 25 kilos of extra weight.
Wow.
And he had his energy and his life back.
Wow.
And it was, we looked back. I remember after we hit that sort of 3-month mark, and he was like, James, do you know what? One of the biggest things I can't believe is that I'm not experiencing any side effects from withdrawing from the drugs, because he was fed so much fear from the medical profession that withdrawing from these medications after such long-term use would create another huge problem. And they were trying to prescribe him drugs to taper off those drugs. I'm not kidding you. There's actually drugs to help you taper off drugs. They just want you hooked on that bandwagon. And so he went cold turkey, but with the important inclusion of the high-dose nutrients and supplementation for his particular condition, and a detox and cleansing diet, which was very simple and very basic.
So, James, a lot of people that are listening right now are in this situation where on this, quote, cocktail of medications, and they got weight problems, and they're exhausted, and they might be battling with depression and all these things. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your beliefs regarding how food and proper supplementation can heal the body?
Sure. One of the people we interviewed for Food Matters, who I adore, was Charlotte Gerson, and she's the daughter of Dr. Max Gerson. And she talks about illness, and I love her approach. She talks about illness in 2 ways. Basically, you have toxicity and deficiency, and it's those 2 elements that cause illness in the body. And that illness can manifest as any particular genetic weakness or predisposition you may have. So if you have a history of breast cancer, and then I through some controlled environment or through naturally being involved in a modern human, you're going to have toxicity in your body, and then you're going to have a deficiency of nutrients from eating a poor diet. That's going to lead to a suppressed immune system, which is then going to manifest as illness with regards to your particular genetic predisposition. Not that genes have a huge part to play in it, but when you do have a suppressed immunity, then your genes can be switched on and off.
Right.
So what happens then is that in order to heal illness, we have to deal with the toxicity and we have to deal with the deficiency. So in order to deal with the toxicity, you have to do a detox of some form. And detoxes can come in simple packages, and detox can come in more complex packages. They're everything from just simply adding green juices and hydration and having some, restful sort of simple exercise and doing that for, 3-7 day period is a very simple, basic. Then you go to the more extreme fasting methods, or you go to 3 and 4 phase elimination programs where you're doing a detox for your liver and your gallbladder and flushing out different parts of the body. So that will help with the toxins. And then you also need to deal with the deficiency of nutrients. So you need to eat foods that are rich in nutrients, that are easily assimilated by the digestive system in the body. And they're foods that come from nature, that are growing from the sun and that have concentrated the sun's energy into the plant form.
It sounds to me a lot like what you're saying is you just have to get back to the way we used to be 100 years ago. It's really, because all the food we're eating, right, is causing all the toxins, all the medications that we're taking are causing all the toxins and causing all these problems. And the food we're eating is deficient also. So really you're just talking about getting back to nature. Indeed.
That's it. It's really that simple.
So, you have mentioned, and we talked about this already just a little bit, how the traditional pharmaceutical industry doesn't have our health and best interest at heart. And maybe you could say, maybe it's true about the food corporations, the major food corporations too. I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Sure. First of all, I think that that's a true statement, but I equally don't. I don't really blame them. Okay. They're in a funny way, they're just meeting our needs.
Right.
Like if you look at fast food drive-through restaurants, it's not as if someone sat down and said, how can we create food that's going to kill people and make them fat?
Right.
Someone sat down and said, this person's driving a car and they don't want to get out of the car to get food. Let's meet them where they're at.
Right. I like what you're saying, because really what you're saying is it kind of puts it back on us. Because it's easy to point at these corporations as evil and trying to kill us, but reality is, if we're willing to do this, and we're not willing to take the time to understand what's important, then someone's going to sell it to us. As long as it's legal, someone's going to sell it. And if you look at the food industry, they're trying to get food to you that's cheap and has a long shelf life, easy to store, easy to
That's what we demand. That's what we're demanding.
And that's what we're wanting. Yeah,
exactly. So it's really a manifestation of our own demands and our own wants. You could say that some of that demand has been manufactured through advertising, and that's certainly probably true to some extent. But I think originally, in the 50s and 60s, there was this whole movement towards convenience, and we became addicted to convenience. And that was like when microwaves came about.
I also think we kind of fell in love with our own understanding of science. It's like we discovered the atom and all of a sudden we thought we were God and we knew everything. And all we had to do is create a pesticide to kill bugs and we thought we were the smartest people in the world and create, radiation to radiate things and we thought we were the smartest. We had this idea that because we understood the atom, we knew life and we knew better. And that's really kind of coming back in our face in every single way as we discover that everything that we've invented that we either eat or take as a medication has repercussions that we had no idea that it would have.
Precisely. I think also from a nature-based philosophy concept, as well as after sort of the whole Darwinian theory was really popular, but it really put humans at the top of the evolutionary pyramid.
Right.
We're so righteous, we know everything, we can manipulate nature and do anything we want because we are the successors of this entire pyramid of evolution. Okay. And as we've discovered more about nature, I mean, these humble animals are so profound, from octopus to dolphins, and just their depth of knowledge. We're still discovering depths of knowledge and information about animals that astound us.
It's amazing, really.
So, I think that's it, which is really a belief system about us being, the conquerors of nature, or us being better than nature, has led to this.
Right, and even the medical paradigm is, they look at the body as like some car that needs to change the spark plug. There's no mind connected to it. And, every once in a while you got to do a placebo study, and the placebo is always getting in the way because the placebo is working as well as the drug, and they're like, darn, we got to do a whole study all over again because that darn placebo got in the way. And everybody's ignoring the fact that our mind has this ability, and our bacteria communicates to our brain and our spirit and our soul. We're just ignoring all of that and just saying, let's cut it out. We'll give you a drug and we'll cut it out. If something wrong with your thyroid, we'll give you a drug, we'll cut it out. Your appendix, give you a drug, cut it out. And that's it. And we just have this holier than thou, and it's really, and that's why I think we're in the situation that we're in.
Yeah, I don't doubt that.
You also, I just want to talk about food labeling a little bit. I remember having a soda water recently, because even if we are trying to be healthy, let's say that we listen to this conversation and we go like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to be really, really healthy, right? I'm not going to have any artificial sweeteners. I'm not going to have any artificial anything, right? So I was in the States recently and I got a bottle of lemon soda water, and that's all I thought I was getting. And it even said no artificial flavors. It said no artificial flavors. And I drank half of it and it tasted a little bit funny. I had a real reaction. I read the back of it, and one of the ingredients was aspartame. Which is one of the most detrimental artificial sweeteners in the world. Yeah. And I'm thinking, how did they do this? How did they get around that? And then I realized that they didn't say no artificial sweeteners. They said no artificial flavors. And they got me, and I'm like into this. So if somebody is just getting started, what should we be looking for in food labels to make sure we can get the things that are healthy?
That's a great question. I think that learning how to read labels and learning how to identify food marketing trickery is a really important skill. And it does take a little bit. To learn those skills. If we take a step back and say, all right, you're walking into the supermarket, whether it's Whole Foods or Ralph's or Albertsons or Woolworths, it doesn't matter. I think the general keys is to just stick to the outside, stick to the real food. Like you said, if you were stuck on an island, what food is available on an island to eat? Well, it's basically fruits, vegetables, some wild birds or fish, simple proteins and simple vegetables. So I think sticking to the outside of a supermarket is a really good start. The other things would be, if you're ever going into any packaged foods, just to start really being able to scan labels and trying to identify some of the top things to avoid. I think just immediately off my head, some of the big things to avoid is high fructose corn syrup. Yeah. That's really, it really spikes your blood sugar a lot, and that's very unhealthy long term as far as the stress it puts on your pancreas and your liver. And then you have also aspartame, like you mentioned, which is a really dangerous artificial sweetener. There's plenty of research showing that it is harmful in the body. And it's plenty of research showing that also when combined with caffeine, that it's very addictive. I met a gentleman the other day who came up to me after I did a talk, and he said, I was hospitalized and in a coma, I think for up to 6 days, because he had aspartame poisoning. Yeah. And he was somebody I just met here locally, and I would never expect that I was going to meet somebody in my life that had that condition. He was addicted to diet soda.
Many people are, yeah.
Drinking like 2 liters a day, and he thought, I'll be fine, but he was still healthy, going to the gym, drinking this diet soda, trying to keep thinking he was doing the right thing, and then all of a sudden went into a coma out of nowhere because his brain was poisoned with aspartame. Yeah. So I think watching out for those two, and then also watching out for a lot of your preservatives, trying to steer clear of them wherever possible. And they come in many different numbers and forms. But those general guidelines are helpful. And for a lot of people with gut issues, I think avoiding gluten can be beneficial as well. I'm not for avoiding a lot of foods. I'm trying to make food transition as easy as possible. So I'm like saying, eat everything as natural as possible. So if you do eat any form of gluten, keep it sourdough or fermented or handmade or organic, and keep it to a small amount, but trying to acknowledge that every food that you eat has an impact on your body and your gut, and that's going to affect how you feel 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 hours, and 3 hours from now, and it's going to affect your health for a lifetime. So really invest in that decision-making process when you eat.
Yeah, and I like what you say about going around the perimeter of the store. I heard one expert say recently that the healthiest ingredients in food are the foods that have no ingredients. So it's like if you're reading ingredients already, you're in the wrong place.
You're in the wrong spot. Yeah, exactly.
And then if you can't pronounce it, then especially. But you just want to, like for me, what I always say is, imagine you're on an island 10,000 years ago. Just eat that way. And that always is going to work. Now, you mentioned that your father was able to lose 50 pounds through this process. I'm wondering if you can speak about how important detoxification is in adding healthier foods for weight loss.
I think detoxification is critical for weight loss because of how fats and toxins work in the body. Yeah. One of the medical doctors we interviewed for Hungry for Change, Dr. Alejandro Junger, who's written a great book on this topic, talks about how that all fats are lipophilic, or they're fat loving, so they attach to fat in the body.
All toxins are
toxins are lipophilic, so they're fat loving. So they attach to fat in the body, and they get stored as fat in the adipose tissue. So in order to release those toxins, we need to detoxify and allow that to come out and help that fat removal and toxin removal. They're linked together.
Exactly. And in addition, a lot of people think detoxification is you're losing weight because you're reducing calories, and that's not from a long-term perspective, that's not the benefit. The benefit is you're unclogging your liver, because when your liver's blocked, you can't lose weight. You're getting rid of the toxins. You're reducing the stresses that are causing your body to hold on to weight. So there's so many enormous benefits to detoxification. I agree with you. So for someone that's listening right now, and there's a lot of people that are going to be in this exact situation that your father was in, what's some practical tips right now? They're going to listen to this interview, and then they're going to go off, and something's going to change. What would you like to see that change be?
Well, I like to help people add one thing to their diet, or two things if they can do it. And I think that those one or two things, if I could narrow it down to two, one of them would be trying to concentrate green plant foods and get it into some sort of liquid form so that they can drink it and get it into their body. Like if you go to your garden, if you're lucky enough to grow some of your own greens, or you go to the produce section and you get kale, cucumber, celery, collard greens, cos, or romaine, and butter lettuce, all these big beautiful greens. They're amazingly beneficial for your health, and maybe arugula as well. And then maybe a little bit of pear or something to give it a bit of sweetness, or some lemon and lime. So you take that and you have this big overwhelming bowl of produce. People don't naturally want to just eat that, but how do you get that green plant food into the body as efficiently as possible, especially if you're not really a big fan of eating that type of food?
And also if your digestion is compromised. That's it.
Precisely, yeah.
Which almost all of us, if we're living a normal life, our digestion is severely compromised. So even if we're just going to eat it normally, we might not be digesting the nutrients.
Exactly.
So what you're suggesting is start juicing.
Start juicing and or blending that in some form.
Yeah.
So put it through a juicer, and the best juicer you got is whatever juicer you have. So dust off that old. We all have an old juicer, whether it's a Jack LaLanne Classic or a Rebel or a new cold press thing. It doesn't matter. Get it out and put that through a juicer and drink that. Drink that green plant food, or put it in a blender. Add a little bit of water. You need a pretty high power blender to whip all that up, and break down that plant food and break down the cellulose into a liquid form so that you can digest it, and within 10 to 15 minutes it's in your bloodstream and working its magic in regards to helping you detoxify and reduce that digestive load and digestive stress on the body.
That's such excellent advice, because as I know people are listening, it's so easy to get overwhelmed because we have this mentality that's like all or none, and that's what we're conditioned to too, and they're thinking about where they're at, and just that to me, like, I'm relaxed when I hear that. I'm relaxed, and I happen to know, just from my own knowledge of health, that is probably one of the best advice that you could give. You just had to pick one thing, because that's going to do the detoxification, as you talked about. That's going to be adding the nutrients. It's going to be healing digestion. It's going to be reducing inflammation, which then is going to let go of all the stress hormones that cause your body to hold on to weight. So it's great. Great advice. So just getting as much vegetables as we can, get that juicer, put it in, start juicing, basically.
And also, I think for people that are overwhelmed by this approach, or that have tried diets before that didn't work, maybe don't even approach it like that. And I don't know what your thoughts are on this, John. Like I'm sure I've heard you speak in this way before, and I know that David Wolfe mentions this. Like, don't take anything else out.
Right.
Have your green juice or your smoothie, your green juice, and then have your coffee or your toast or whatever.
Right, exactly.
Don't add that in and then take those baby steps. So if you add that in for a week, notice how good you feel, and then keep adding more and more.
And it's really easy for me to teach that, because that's the way I lost the weight. Because when I first started losing weight, I was still eating chocolate and chips and pizza and all kinds of junk food, because it's what my body craved. But at the same time, I was having a green smoothie every day. I was having flax seeds. I was having salads, sprouts. I was taking probiotics and digestive enzymes. I was meditating. I was doing all these things, and then eventually I couldn't eat the chocolate anymore. It was just the industrial kind of chocolate. I couldn't eat the pizza anymore, and it went away. And whereas when I tried it the other times, it'd be the guilt, the shame, the good days, the bad days, the binging, and it just didn't work. So to me, that is the perfect advice.
And your work is really based on stress reduction too, which I love how you talk about that in the Hungry for Change film as well. And when you remove your stress and anxiety around food, that's a big stress you're removing from your body, because a lot of people, when they eat certain types of foods, they have a stress reaction to it. Whether your body is physically reacting to the toxins and the stress of that food in the digestive tract, or whether you're mentally stressed about eating that food, like, oh no, I shouldn't eat this, or you eat it and you feel guilty for having eaten it. So having that green juice can help you alleviate some of that stress. It's like, well, I've had my green juice today. It's okay. Like, just relax. It's cool. And then just working into that process.
And you will naturally find that you won't want the other things. The more you put healthy into you, the more your body starts rejecting the unhealthy. It's almost like you got to educate your body, because those same companies that are out there trying to satisfy this need of fast food and blah, 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 they're making, it's $1 trillion business, basically, food industry. And they're going to be pretty smart about getting you addicted to their food and confusing your body and your taste buds. So re-educating your body is really what it comes down to.
Precisely.
So James, where can we connect with you? How can we learn more? How can we get involved in what you're doing? Tell us about Food Matters TV, which I'm very, very excited about.
So Food Matters is the film that started it, and we've built the website around this. We have lots of articles on the Food Matters website and on our Facebook page as well, where we're sharing them every day to keep people inspired on a day-to-day basis. But one of our new babies, which we're super excited about, is FMTV, or Food Matters TV. And FMTV is basically collating and bringing together the world's best health and wellness documentaries, extended interviews with experts, recipe video content, plus also some yoga and lifestyle and exercise content for strengthening your back or improving your posture or energizing yoga sequences. So I really saw how profound an impact film had on transforming my dad's life. And then using that message to help get Food Matters and Hungry for Change to more people. And then in the process, seeing how many great films were being made each year that weren't quite getting to the audience they needed to get to. So I felt passionate about bringing them together in one space.
So how many documentaries do you have in that whole one area of Food Matters TV?
We have, I would say, close to 100 different documentaries and programs in there now, which amounts to over 400 different videos, because some of them have, say, a recipe program might have 10 videos in there, or a documentary might have the feature with some extended interviews.
So basically one stop and we get 400 of the world's leading mind-body health experts in videos. Amazing.
And if you watch a documentary a week, or if you're an extreme personality and you watch one every couple of days, there is no quicker way, I believe, to just transform your ideas about your health and your body and the planet and the food that we eat than watching documentaries. It's really, because when my dad was sick, I gave him the 300-page book on natural healing to read about and he was not interested. Plus it takes weeks to get through that sort of text. And yet if you can put it into some sort of documentary form and then collate those films together, you can download a lot of this information in a rapid form. It's
very powerful. And so and some of the documentaries that you have right now are just so incredibly inspiring. I love the site. It's one of my favorite places. Thanks, James. I love the work that you're doing. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it for myself and for the entire world. So thanks for doing what you're doing, and thanks for taking time to speak with us today.
Appreciate it, John. Great chatting with you.
Thanks. So thanks everyone for watching. I love James's advice that just simply adding a couple of juices every day will create a positive momentum in your life, rather than focus on deprivation and denial, which we all know is never sustainable. So definitely give it a try. Dust off the old juicer. Check out FMTV. It is an amazing, amazing resource. And I'll speak to you real soon. Take care.